to the hand of God. I'm gonna keep the faith. I'm gonna hold this banner high. I'm gonna finish my race. I'll receive hidden manna and a new white stone when I win this war. I've got a church and a family. And
welcome back to another episode of Defining the Dash. We're happy to have you with us today. So glad you stopped by, made some time to visit with us. Today we're talking to Brother Mark Mullins, continuing his testimony. We're going to, we said last week, we're going to dive into the meat and potatoes of his testimony. And as you heard last week, Brother Mark had an awesome upbringing, a dedicated mother and father, taking them back and forth an hour drive each way to church and to a good holiness church, a Christian school, explaining to them how they were focused on his future and the importance of being raised right, although it came, with some hard decisions they had to make, and not always necessarily being accepted in the community, but they were still focused on the cost and making everything count for their children. And so today we're going to go into his testimony a little bit later in his life as he's grown up a little older. We got up into his early teen years. And so Brother Mark, as you decided to head off into college and choose a occupation, choose a career path, how old was it, you think, or at what point did you choose that you wanted to go into the medical field and follow that path?
Well, Brother Chad, I'll be honest with you, as I always try to be honest. So it just seems like a good time to say that.
Absolutely.
I remember being in college, and not college, I'm sorry, in high school, and that 12th grade year coming.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and so you want to, I was trying to kick it off as long as I could, this decision, what am I going to be when I grow up? Do I even want to grow up, kind of thing, or do I just want to live in Mom and Dad's basement? Well, Mom and Dad's basement there's a coal furnace down there, and there's a lot of dust, and so I knew I didn't want to live in the dust, and so I had to do something, And so, honestly, when it come time to choosing a career, the reason why I went to the medical field is for two reasons. Number one, job security.
Sure.
And number two, I heard nurses made more than what I could make at Burger King.
Oh, both good reasons.
Both good reasons.
Yeah.
And so I can't really say there was I wanted to be a hero or save lives, that kind of stuff. Going to the medical field, I just wanted job security and something where I could pay my bills. And so that's kind of decided to go to. My mom was a nurse, and and I thought, well, yeah, why not? So here I go.
Understandable.
Yeah.
and really coming from Buchanan County and over even into McDowell, I was raised in Buchanan, you was raised in McDowell, neighboring counties really, across state lines, but jobs really was limited.
Right.
I mean, it was either, very select few fast food restaurants, maybe one or two grocery stores, coal mines, or medical field.
Right.
I mean, that was pretty much it.
That's about all you had. Or you can be an artist
and draw a check.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's the best. That's the best one. And so most of the county did that.
We had a lot of
artists.
We have a lot of artists.
And
still do.
I'm an artist now, so I have to be careful making those jokes. But but we did come from a small community where there was very limited career paths to follow, and I know you chose to go to college a little bit away from home, and how did that go in regards to being able to continue spiritually the way you were and the way you was raised, and can you share a little bit of that with us and maybe some of the challenges you faced and that type of thing?
Right. Yeah, I'd be happy to. And so the way it was when I was growing up, I knew that I had to go to a school in the state that I lived in.
Right.
I didn't have an opportunity to go. I guess I could have, but not really. You know, Mom just told me I couldn't go anywhere. I had to have in-state tuition, and I understood that. I was 12 years in 12th grade, and I already had some math classes and stuff, and so the biggest two choices that I had is I could have went to West Virginia University, which was up in Morgantown. My brother had went there. Mm-hmm. It was about 5 hours away. And a really big school. And what I didn't like about W, which is probably what my brother loved about it, and what I didn't like about it, is that everything was on a hill. And W, they had this awesome train system that you can get on. You can go, from one community to another community, and it was massive. And I was really afraid I'd get up there and get lost, really. Right. And so that's why W was not a thing for me. Couldn't do it. And so the next best choice I had was Marshall University. And so my mother had went there, my aunt had went there, and so it just seemed like a good ideal. It was fairly closer to home, not fairly close. It's still everything. If you're living in McDowell County, especially nothing's growing up, nothing's close, man. Yeah. I mean, Sam's is 2 hours away, Walmart's an hour and a half away,
Right.
And so I thought, let's just go to Marshall. So we go to Marshall, and so I had the in-state tuition. Also at Marshall, there was a church there fairly close to it, Flatwoods, Kentucky. Brother Lloyd Bailey was my pastor for years. I don't know if he'd claim me, but I'll claim him.
I believe he will.
Brother Lloyd, man, great guy, great friend of mine, still is. But anyway, I went there to Marshall University, and there was a great guy that lived in Huntington, West Virginia, which is where Marshall is, and Jason Painter's his name. And for 3 years, Brother Jason would pick me up outside of the towers or outside of Holderby Hall. He would pick me up in the car, him and Michelle, and watch them the daughters just grow up, man. I remember that youngest one just still in diapers. I just watched them out. It's like every time I took a math class, they'd have another kid. I just quit taking math classes and just graduated. For Brother Jason's sake.
Yeah, for his sake.
Yeah.
Brother Painter, he's like, thank you. He was so glad to see you graduate.
He was so happy. He was so happy. But he would pick me up, or Sister Michelle would, or Sister Kathy Caperton, or her husband. Somebody would pick me up there at Marshall, and they would take me to church, and they would bring me back, and they would pick me up as long as I was willing to go, which was almost every service. Unless I had a crazy exam the next day, and I didn't get my paper written, and it was due the next morning. Those carnal reasons. I'd probably lay out of church a few times, not too much, probably less than 10 times, but they would pick me up on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, and Friday, and didn't cost me any gas money. I would have to buy, if we went out to eat, I'd buy my own food. Sometimes he'd be buying my own food. And so it was great, man. And so I just recommend anybody looking for college, Brother Jason's still in Huntington area. And,
just stay away from math classes.
Just stay away from math classes. He'd probably appreciate that. But yeah, that's kind of how college went in the last year. I was able to get a vehicle, Astro van. Mom and Dad's Astro van had to run around, and the Astro vans were awesome.
I remember that van.
Oh yeah, and so I was riding around, cool dude riding around there in Huntington. But then I could actually take myself to church. And I remember something about that Astro van. I give the testimony of this, and I just thought about it. I was running in that Astro van. I was going to church one night, Brother Chad. I think it was a Friday night. I hate to throw a night out there because it wasn't Sunday. Because Sunday, Brother Bailey would allow me to stay there at the church in between services. And so I was a broke college kid, and it was probably about a 40-minute drive. And so he would allow me to stay there in evangelist quarters. And so I got to crash out there, take a great nap in the good AC, and go to church that night. Life was good. But I was coming to church one night, so it makes me think it was another day other than Sunday. I'm thinking it was Friday night. And broke college kid. I had some income. I was being a resident advisor. I was an RA. And so what that means is that I had a floor that I oversaw. We had to do programs and had to have a certain GPA and some of those kind of things. And really, sometimes they just got desperate and just, had to have had a body. And I was just a body probably. And so, but anyway, I was going to church. And I remember that I was on, I needed gas. And if I was stopped to get gas, I was going to be late for church. And this was probably back in the day when I had, I just believed God. this day particularly anyway. And I asked God, I was praying, I remember praying, and I remember asking God if He would give me some gas in my gas tank. Now that sounds silly, and looking back on it now, I didn't know what I was thinking. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
If I heard of one of my kids doing that, I'd probably have talked to him. I like the way you have faith, but this is crazy.
Right.
I was writing down that, but I remember the gas tank, Brother Chad. I went from probably, I don't know, maybe an eighth of a tank in that Astro, and I knew I needed to get gas, and I was just praying, asking God to perform a miracle. And I remember watching that gas go from about an eighth of a tank, and it went up to about a 3/8 of a tank. It didn't get to quite to half tank, and so my faith probably ran out, But I remember watching the gas gauge go up, and I was thinking, man, maybe there's something wrong with the van. It's an older van. Maybe my faith wasn't what I thought it was. Maybe this really wasn't a miracle. And so, but, what do? You got 3/8 tank gas, just keep going to church, So I didn't stop for gas. I went out to church. And then I remember I got to church, and I was still at 3/8 of a tank of gas, and I drove back probably 45 minutes back to Huntington, and I drove on that gas for about a week. And it was that fourth year of college when I had that old Astro van that I watched God literally put gas in my gas tank. And I watched that go from an eighth of a tank to 3/8, and I rode it. And that was the cheapest gas I ever got.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
I'm about to try to get some more faith, man, these gas prices.
But Brother Mark, you brought up a good point, though. In this day and time, that's crazy. We look at that and but when we were younger, I remember people getting up and giving in prayer requests because of a test they had in college the next day, or in school the next day, or we prayed about everything. Mm-hmm. And nowadays we don't pray about nothing.
Right.
So there's been a drastic change over the the years, and nowadays we act. Mm-hmm. Back then it was we prayed so we didn't have to act.
Right. Right.
Nowadays we're just like acting and being like, well, let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah.
I'll be late.
Right.
And so which is probably a lot of the reasons we saw way more miracles then than we do now.
Sure.
Is because we had the faith then.
You were talking about, we used to pray about taking tests and that kind of stuff in school. And I remember being a junior there a freshman at Marshall. And I knew I wanted to be a nurse, not because I wanted to save lives, just because I wanted job security. I wanted to make a decent paycheck. That's really about it. And so even these days, I wonder if that's the reason why I'm still in healthcare. I'm just kidding. But anyway, that's another point for another day. But I remember, taking tests, and when I went as a freshman, I wasn't accepted into the nursing program. Now, I know that when I went to school, if it was in-state tuition, there were certain grants and stuff that we could apply for with our income in the home and stuff, and be able to get a better, maybe not a free ride to school, but just more assistance. And I remember that Mom, she was with Josh and Jason and my two sisters, and then there I was in the middle of it, and it slipped her mind, and she had forgot to apply for that. And so this is my mom, which I owe a lot of stuff to my mom. And so, and this is just one of them. Now, Mom, she still wanted me to go to school, although she didn't apply for the grant. It was probably my responsibility because I'm the student, but my mom was trying to help me with that. And so she just got busy with life, and so I was going to school. I was not in the nursing program. I wanted to be a nurse, but I wasn't there. And so what I could do is I could take the classes of all the other nursing students took. And then the second year, when people begin to fail out, then I could go in as a second-year student. And so, but I remember going there, and public school was so much different than Christian school. So much different. I didn't have no idea how different it was. I mean, I had great teachers and stuff in school. Nathan tried to do what he could with me. You can only do so much with somebody, and so he tried. And so, but I remember when I was going there, the way they tested was different. The way we studied was different. Right. Study groups, writing papers, so different. And so I don't remember how many in high school, Brother Chad, we had A, B, C, D answers. And when I got to college, you have A, B, C, D. And sometimes you can have more than one right answer, and you had to choose the best of the right answers. And that's a mind game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I remember going to school and knowing that I didn't have an option other than passing these tests and doing good on them, because this was coming out of Mom's paycheck, which was very minimal.
Right.
And so I studied, man, and for 4 years at Marshall, by the grace of God, I studied. I remember Friday nights, I'd be in the library studying, about anatomy or physiology or biology or whatever I was studying, and probably math. But I remember studying and hearing the roars of the stadium, the football games. And here I am, I'm just trying to study and just trying to focus so I can get into pass these classes. And I remember going to church, and I'd give him prayer requests that God would just help me do okay. You know what I mean? And, man, I tell you what, there's this one time I was struggling with a history class, and I think I had a D in the class. We was about maybe a third of the way through that. Had a D in the class. I was a first-year student. I had no idea about taking public school tests, much less trying to write paragraphs in response to a question about history that I knew nothing about.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I had a D in the class, and I knew that if this grade didn't get up, then I was probably going to be shot for the next year, and I had all this pressure on me. Mom was paying for my school and stuff, and so I didn't have an option. I had to do this. But I remember I went to prayer about it, and got some Sister Judy out of the church, and Sister Donna, and Brother Lloyd, Sister Kathy, and a lot of the prayer warriors of the church to help me pray. And I've never experienced this since. Not to this degree anyway. But I remember praying, and the Lord I felt like it was the Lord. I was inspired anyway to start recording with the tape recorder the professor. Mm-hmm. And then this idea came to me, is that if he's going to test me on what he says, and it's not so much in front of me on a paper, then I need to know what he says. And so I recorded him, and I took that and I wrote down, I would literally write out his lectures, word by word, every week. I would write out his lectures. And I remember going and sitting for his tests, and the Lord allowed me, because I wrote all that up, I could literally somewhat flip through the pages in my mind of what I'd written down. And when he asked a question about World War II and, whatever the case was, I could flip through my mind, and I think this might have been an anointing in some ways. It sounds a little silly, probably, but I don't mean for it to sound silly. But I remember to be able to flip through my mind a couple pages and just almost read through that document from the top down and transcribe exactly what he said on that paper.
Wow.
And would you believe that the next 2/3 of that, I got A after A after A, and my grade was pulled up to a B+.
Wow.
And when you was talking about testing in college and praying about testing, I tell you what, it may just happen to me, may not ever happen to anybody else, but I got a feeling it's happened to a lot of people. And so my advice is really, for struggling in school and stuff, really consider taking that to prayer, because God might just perform a miracle for you.
That's exactly right. I believe it. It's nothing's too small for God. Now, Brother Mark, we talked a little bit before we started recording the episode here about some more of your testimony, and I want you to share as much of that as you're comfortable with, because there are different things when kids go off to college and they're away from home and they're outside the grip of mom and daddy, so to speak, and they're in unfamiliar territory, and they're under pressure, and they're sometimes they stray away from the way they was raised. They stray away from God and things, and there was a time when you kind of found yourself in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that portion of your testimony and how work us into how God brought you back and that type of thing?
Yeah, yeah, I'd be happy to point out here that probably there may be some listeners to us, Brother Chad, that may be in a situation like I am, where you're going off to school and you're wondering, can I stay saved and live and go to a public school, be it taking engineering or nursing or basket weaving or whatever,
right.
Whatever we're taking. And I want to say yes. And the reason why I want to say that is, for 3 years in my undergrad, I lived on campus. Thankfully, I never had to share a room with anybody. That was amazing. That's probably a miracle in itself. But stayed on campus. Now, not every room had an air conditioner, which was another wild story. But anyway, Stayed on campus, and for 3 years I was saved. For 3 years I was a preacher. For 3 years I was filled with the Holy Ghost. For 3 years I would even go to Bible classes and Bible studies even on campus. I would share my testimony with folks. And I remember being outside of Holderby Hall on the back side of the hall, and there was a group of us that would get together. It's probably about 10 of us, and we came from all different walks of life. We just from all different walks of life. None of us were, I don't think we're the same really. But I remember we would sit there and we would discuss theology. Now, here I am with a holiness preacher background, so right. I've got my convictions, and I know what the Bible says, King James Version. But I got the opportunity to talk to people that didn't go to church. One of Chris Stone, one of my RA, and one of my best friends in school, he was actually a Catholic guy, really good, great guy. We just didn't see eye to eye on everything. But anyway, so we had a Catholicism. We had people that were just agnostic. We had a holiness preacher. We had people that came from well-to-do families. We had people that came from poor families. We had people there that was there to actually learn something, and we had people that was there just because mom and dad was pay foot in the bill and they didn't have anything else to do, so it was just come to school and partying. Right. And so there was a lot of us that was there, and I remember those conversations for 3 years, sharing the gospel with those folks. And I remember people that would come to that conversation, outsiders we didn't even know in our little group, and they would just be discouraged and down and that kind of stuff, and just a little bit of the gospel, a little bit of life, maybe just telling a Bible story or something. But communicating about the Word of God would just bring light and life into their life. You would walk away with a little bit of a smile, and maybe their head wasn't hung as low. They still had a math test next day. I don't know how good it can get. But for about 3 years, Brother Painter picked me up, took me to church. Checked in on me, and for 3 years I lived on campus, and I lived holiness in a secular world on campus. Right. And it is possible. It is possible. Now, the last year of my schooling, I was able to move off campus. I was working in the local hospital as a nurse tech, still riding around the old van. Well, that's the year I got the van, I guess. And moving off campus, I moved down to the west end of Hayden. Now, the west end of Hayden is like being from the west side, you know what I mean? And on the west end of Hayden is where you hear the robberies and the gunshots and that kind of stuff. And there was a few nights, I'm just to put this plug out there, if you ever live in Hayden, stay away from the west end unless you go to the far west end. But if you're kind of right there around 1st Street, you want to be careful. But living on 1st Street, and I remember a couple of nights, I hear these gunshots go off, and I hear sirens, that kind of stuff. Pretty crazy place. But that last year, when I moved off campus in that little apartment, I thought when I was getting into that, I'm growing up, I'm going to spread my wings, I'm going to fly, I'm ready to just live life. And so going into that, Brother Chad, I thought, you know what, I'm going to keep a hold of God, let God keep a hold of me. I'm going to keep going to church. I'm going to keep doing everything that I have been doing for these other 3 years. And I got so secure in what I had done and how I had lived that I let go of the security that's involved with how I need to live now, if that makes sense. And so what I did is I got off campus and got down towards the west end, and I just quit reading my Bible. I quit praying. I was still going to church, and really I think I was still sitting on the platform, if I remember correctly. But that's just that was just my testimony. Of course, Brother Lloyd, he man of discernment, very wonderful guy. And he, he probably knew I wasn't praying, probably knew I wasn't reading, but he was just gracious and merciful, and the Lord just didn't tell him to kick me off the platform yet. But I remember, going through that, and really what happened is I just quit praying and quit reading. And then from that, I would begin a downward spiral of backsliding, and that was my last year of college. And so, I remember that last year of college, struggling with that degree, and that's when I started wondering what am I missing out on in life? You know, I see these other people, you know, that I'm friends with, and they're going out and they're partying and they're having a good time. And here I've been this goody two shoes, Mr. Youth Camp growing up, you know, Mr. Preacher, you know, that kind of stuff. And I wonder, when I stopped reading, I stopped praying, I started wondering, what am I missing out on? You know, and that maybe it's kind of similar to you know, Lot, you know, when he pitched his tent towards Sodom. Right. Just kind of wonder, what have I been missing out on this whole time? And that's probably where I begin my downward spiral. Now, with that downward spiral, it would just be a few months, you know, when I would quit going to church. Now, I would have to say, I have to put this plug in about the type of friends that I had, the church friends that I had. You know, I would go a few weeks without going to church, maybe a couple months without going to church. But on Friday nights, every other Friday night at least, we would go out to Giovanni's. And man, I love Giovanni's. Right. And we'd go to Giovanni's. I still love Giovanni's. And we'd go there, and man, they put their arm around me. They give me a big hug, want to know how I'm doing, want to know how school was going, how's work going, that kind of stuff. And there was a guy, he's actually my Sunday school teacher at the time when I was going to church, Brother Randy Cordell. And when I was doing nurse extern, and he had a lot to do with me getting on there, and you know. But Brother Randy, he knew my life, and he knew my struggle. And you know, that last year, me and him would be working the ER, and I would go out with folks, and this is when I was struggling, and we'd go out, and first, you know, I just wonder, what am I missing out on? We would take smoke breaks, and so what I would do, you know, with these smoke breaks is I would just go out and, you know, just kind of hang out and get some fresh air. I mean, what do you do at 3 o'clock in the morning? You know what I mean? Right. You know, all the crazy people that was going to make silly decisions, that already made the decisions that night. If they were going to be found that night, they was already found and brought to the hospital. And then everybody else had to be found at 6 o'clock. And so you got them 2 hours a day. So it's so easy. You go outside and you just kind of hang out there. These other kind of things. What am I missing out on? And so, you know how they say. They say, you know, YOLO, you only got one life to live. And so it's interesting that the pivotal point of my life, when I started going downhill, is when I stopped reading, I stopped praying, and then I started wondering. And then from that wonder is when I started making some bad decisions.
And how was it, Brother Mark, that God was able to bring you back? Let me, you know, I know, you know, we've discussed this story a few times and things, but how was He able to turn that all around for you?
Yeah. So probably, you know, I graduated nursing school, went on to be an ER nurse there at King's Daughters, and worked there for a couple years. For a couple years of my life, I struggled kind of, you know, up and down, in and out, you know, one of those kind of cases. I was one of those cases. And really, it got to the point that in my life, you know, one of those downswings, once again, I got to think, what I'm missing out on, some of that kind of stuff. This is what was going through my mind. But it was one of them downswings that I got to the place that it hit me that here I am. I was a Christian. I was Holy Ghost filled. I was called to preach. I was a man that, you know, Mom thought I was full of promise, you know, if you will. You know, Dad thought I was full of promise. And I felt at some point of one of those downswings, Brother Chad, that I had let myself down what I thought that I would be. You know, one of these days maybe the Lord would call me to be a missionary, and I always wondered if I'd be a missionary or something like that, or be an evangelist. I talked to Brother Cole about that one time, about being evangelized and stuff. And so, but anyway, I thought maybe that would be what God would have for my life. And then, but when I started struggling, I struggled really bad and got into things I never should got into. When I went through that struggle, I felt like I let myself down. I felt like I let my family down. I let my pastor down. Let my friends down. And really, when I got to that point, you know, you can do one of two things. You could either man up and go back to the cross and ask God to meet you where you are and take the baggage that you have and the decisions that you've made and the pain that you have and the regret that you have. Or you can allow that to drive you further away from God. And for whatever reason, the devil's probably involved. We blame everything on the devil. The devil probably was involved with this one. But for whatever reason, I chose the second option. And so my choice in that was, I was so depressed. I was so down. And I thought, you know what? I let everybody down. Let's just head to Texas. Now, something interesting. That's what David Crockett did. For all them history people out there. Yeah. So I was following in David. I didn't have the moccasins on, but I was kind of following old Dave's shoes, and so I go to Texas.
We've got something for everybody in this show, man.
That's right, man. He's like, forget you guys. I'm going to Texas. I'm going to Alamo.
Out of here.
And so I go to Texas, and I go to Texas, Brother Chad, for two reasons. One reason is that I was depressed, and I'd let myself down, felt like everybody down, and so I just wanted to get out of town.
Right.
You know what I mean? And another reason is that I had a truck I had to pay for. I was looking at maybe getting a higher education degree, and I wasn't interested in a lot of student loan debt, and so I went. The money was good as a travel contract nurse, and so I go to Texas and I work in the ER that JFK was taken to when he was shot, which was pretty cool. Not that he was shot, but the hospital was pretty cool. And great story about that hospital. So I'm working in the ER. I'll plug this in there. I'll get back to spiritual work. And so I'm working in the ER, and I know nothing about Spanish. And so when I get down there, I realize how little I knew Spanish. And so we've got 100 beds in the ER. And one time we had 100 patients signed up in the back, and we had over 100 patients in the waiting room. It was a massive emergency room.
Wow.
Well, they decided to put this old hill jack out in triage. So I know nothing about Spanish at all. I wished I knew more now, really now. But anyway, I got there and I got this little this patient come up on my little docket for me to call, and his name was, what it read was George. And so I don't know what his last name was. So I'm going to say Martinez. That just sounds like a good Spanish name. And
right.
so I'm just walking out, and I'm like, George Martinez. Anyway, and so I have this guy comes up to me. He's like 25 years old. And he pecks me on the shoulder. He's like, do you mean Jorge? I was like, that's exactly what I mean.
You misunderstood me.
Exactly. But anyway, I'm down in Texas and I'm working, and I'm staying in this Candlewood Suites, and I can tell you where it was. I can't remember the road. We hopped in the vehicle at night. We'd be there by tomorrow night sometime, and I can show you where it was if it's still there. Not too far down the road from where a Whataburger is. Love Whataburger. Don't know why, but I just love it. But anyway, I'm there in that motel room, and I'm still depressed. I have tried many things that the world had to offer, and none of it was filling. It was all empty.
Yeah.
It was all empty. It didn't matter how high I had gotten. I wasn't at that time, but it didn't matter how drunk I was. It didn't matter to what places I went or what I got involved in. There was always long in my heart for more. And what got me most about that, Brother Chad, is I remember being down there, and it's one thing to be numb when it comes to cold weather, and it's something else to be spiritually numb.
Right. And
when I say that is I had went probably 4 or 6 months probably without feeling any kind of conviction. Wow. I mean, I remember being in church, the Holy Ghost moving, I didn't feel anything. And I'd heard preachers talk about that, getting to that point where you just don't feel anything anymore. And I thought I was up the creek, no paddle, really right. A lot of ways. And so, but I remember, being down there, it had been months since I'd really felt anything. I was depressed. I was running from, I don't know what I was running to, don't know what I was running from. I was just running. And I was down there, and it was in the Candlewood Suites, and in the hallway on the right side, right before you go out the door, that God came into that room. Conviction fell on my heart, and I don't know if I was listening to a song. I wasn't listening to preaching, maybe a song, maybe not. I don't know. I ain't heard a sermon in months. And I felt like God dealt with me and gave me another chance. And that chance was, I felt like I had two options that day. I felt like I could continue the way that I was going. I could keep running from God. I could keep running to what? I don't know. From what? I don't know. Just running. or God was going to give me a space and an opportunity to try again, to go back home and just try again. And so, thankfully, I had enough sense, that I chose the better of the two routes. And I got down, and when I prayed, I didn't have accolades that I could give God.
Right.
I couldn't say I've been to Sunday school every Sunday for the last year. I couldn't say that I had listened to the preacher, I had taken notes during church, I'd been listening to nothing but Christian music. I couldn't say that. But what I could say is that, Lord, here I am. Here's my mistakes. Here's my baggage. Here's what I've been running from or to. And when I prayed, I just gave him me.
Wow.
Didn't have anything else to give.
Right.
And so got saved that night. And from that point forward, I just started watching God work miracle after miracle after miracle in my life. And I'll say this, to kind of leave the listeners in an upswing, if you will. It's not all depressing, there's some good things. But one of those good things, I remember coming home that night, or not that night, within a couple of weeks, I was going to finish my contract out, didn't renew, the money was really good, didn't renew my contract, and come back home. I felt like that's what God gave me an opportunity to do. So I was on my way back home, and I'm coming through Charleston, West Virginia, and that area, and Brother Nathan Morris is pioneering a church there, right, not too far from Charleston. And so I go there that night, and I don't know if Brother Nathan knew that I'd been struggling up and down. Probably the last time he seen me was at a youth camp, what I'm saying, and I was doing good and shouting with everybody else. But he'd asked me that night, and we was in that little storefront, and I'll never forget, you walk in the front of the store, you walk up these steps and into the back and down into this big room. That was where the sanctuary was. Walked down there, felt right at home, like I never missed a beat. And it's really something how God can save somebody and put them back in a place where he just restarts you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, now, by no means was I ready to take a text. I mean, you know what I'm saying? But God had saved me, and Brother Nathan asked me if I want to testify, and I testified. And there's about 10 of us there probably. And probably been less than that if anybody found out I was going to sing that night. But he asked me if I had a song, and the old song I was singing coming back from Texas, windows down the truck, is I tell you, the best thing I ever did do. Yeah. I took off the old coat and put on the new. And I don't know how it sounded that night, but ever since then I've been living that. I've been living that song. Yeah.
Now, one thing you had told us when we was talking a little bit before the episode that I thought was an important fact to point out is no matter what you did and no matter what you tried, you still really wasn't, no matter how numb you got and things, that conviction, you still felt that, that pull or the emptiness, that something was missing still, or, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This is going back probably about 2-3 years. This is going back to my last year of college is when I started noticing this.
Uh-huh.
And somebody had mentioned a verse to me, and Psalms 139:8 says, "If I ascend up to heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there."
Yes. And
knowing about the first part of that verse, being in church services, on shouting the ground, rolling in the floor, run the aisles. I never had the faith to run the pews, but I ran the aisles a couple times. And so, if I ascend up to heaven, if I'm feeling I'm on fire for God, you're there.
Right.
But it's the second part of that verse that I lived, and there may be some listeners out there that's living that.
Absolutely. That
if I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there.
Yes, sir.
And so it's the making the bed in hell part, Brother Chad. I remember, there was places I would go. I would go to the bar room, and there I would consume alcohol, and I don't know, it's the craziest thing I ever did in my life. Probably one of the craziest things I ever did. I've done a lot of crazy stuff. That's one of the craziest ones probably. But I remember being there, and I'm telling this for a reason. I'm not not trying to give the devil any credit, but I'm giving God glory. I remember being there, and when I would consume that, My key to stop is when I got numb. That's a dangerous place. Don't ever do that. That's just silly, stupid. It's crazy. But anyway, that was my key. But I remember it didn't matter, Brother Chad, how loud the music was. It didn't matter what all we were consuming. It didn't matter how many friends were around me. It didn't matter what I got into. There was never a point that I remember when I was going through that and dealing with that and participating in that stuff that I did not feel conviction from God and know that I shouldn't be here. I know better than this.
Yeah.
I don't know why I do it, but I know better than this. This isn't the plan that God has for my life, you know. And so if I make my bed in hell, if I decide to sleep in hell, thou art there. And so, Brother Chad, that makes bad decisions over and over and over again. And it doesn't matter, you know, how high the high is, or how numb the numbness is, or how loud the music is, or, you know, how popular the crowd is. You know, engage in that kind of stuff when you're in the height of your pleasure, and when everything should be going right, you should be feeling great, and you feel worthless. That's God dealing with you. You've made your bed in hell, and God is there. But the good news is, God is there.
Right.
You know, now God ain't gonna follow you to the bar. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that the love of God and the mercy of God and the grace of God is so great that it can extend to anybody. It doesn't matter if you're in the gutter or
Right.
you're on the rooftop. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I'm so thankful for what he has done, Brother Mark, in your life. Now, you know, like we said earlier, you know, the Sunday school teacher you've become, preacher. Man, some of the sermons you've preached have been such a blessing. You know, the being here on the podcast, you know, God surely had a work for you to do. And, you know, a lot of this you couldn't foresee it. But he surely has blessed you with the work to do, and we're so thankful for all of his mercy and his grace and his love that has brought you back. And to any listeners out there, a lot of the advice Brother Mark has given is very valuable advice. And you know, take that from somebody that's been there. You know, somebody that's went through what you may be going through, and be sure to at every opportunity just give it to God, and you don't have to make necessarily the same mistakes that somebody else has made. Right. If Brother Mark is sharing something with you and you're headed down that road, then it's not too late to turn around and avoid maybe some of the mistakes that he may have made. And so that's why it's important for us to tell these things in these podcasts is, you know, we may not, you know, maybe we don't want you to make the same mistakes that we made. If we can save you a few scars in your life, then, you know, then that's all the better. So, Brother Mark, thank you for being transparent with us. Thank you for sharing where God's brought you from, all the things he's done for you. And we'll go ahead and wrap this episode. And be sure to tune in with us next week. Share a smile with a neighbor. Shake a hand. And until then, let's make every moment count. God bless you.
When I win this war, I've got a church and a family, and they're worth fighting for.